So hello everyone and welcoming you to this amazing channel of PW English medium, and in today's bridge course we'll be trying to fill some gaps between class 11 and class 12, and the chapters or the concepts we'll be covering, that is animal tissue from the chapter structural organization in animals of class 11, and the concepts, important concepts and the concept gaps of all 6 chapters of human physiology. Myself Biswajit, your zoology mentor at this particular channel of PW English medium and PW NEET English. This particular session is for those particular students, those who have a little bit idea of about class 11, and they are going or jumping from class 11 to 12, but they have some learning gaps, right, for when you talk about this particular chapters. So you are free to ask your doubts in the chat box, in the comment section, and obviously one by one we'll be simplifying the topics from very basic. So again, good evening everyone, and let's get started. Okay, so these are the whole and sole topic for today we'll be covering, that is animal tissue, human physiology, and obviously under human physiology we need to cover respiratory system, circulatory system, excretory system, neural system, endocrine system, muscular system, and skeletal system. Let's start with the first topic first, that is animal tissue, and you know that is from the chapter given in your NCERT, that is structural organization in animals. Okay, I believe this is the most important chapter, of class 11 biology. Now why it's so? As because biology starts with cell, that is called cytology or cell biology, and upon progressive evolution, as unicellular organisms will be undergoing evolution, advancement, and gradually they will become multicellular, right? Multicellular means they are animals, they are plants, they are fungi. So particularly we will be focusing on the tissue system of animals. Okay, so whenever we hear this term tissue, what comes into our mind, that is a group of cells. Okay, this is the first thing that will come into our mind. Now what is the second thing that should come into our mind? That group of cells should be of similar origin. The third thing that should come into our mind, the group of cell will be held together with the help of a special kind of ground substance or matrix that is called as intercellular ground substance or intercellular matrix, and that is responsible for holding the cells together, holding all those groups of cells, holding the cells together. Okay, now the last points, while we will be defining tissue, that we need to say that those group of cells may have similar structure and similar function. Okay, now this particular information about tissue, the similar structure and similar function, that may have or may not have, means a tissue, all the cells of a tissue may have similar structure and function, may not have a similar structure or function. So this particular point, may or may not have. So the identifying or the defining feature of a tissue, so we can conclude in this manner, they are group of cell with similar origin and they are connected or held together with the help of intercellular matrix. They may or may not have similar structure and similar function. Though in nature most of the tissues, the cells will be performing similar structure and similar function, but there are examples, there are exceptional tissues. Okay, they have similar, they are group of cells, similar origin, they are connected by intercellular matrix, but they do not perform similar function. They do not have similar structure. Like if we talk about blood, if we talk about blood, so blood is also a tissue, right? Blood is fluid connective tissue, specialized connective tissue. But if we talk about the cells of blood, blood has RBC, blood has WBC, blood has platelets. Blood has platelets. Okay. Now, what is the structure of RBC? Biconcave in shape. The shape of mature RBC in our body is biconcave shape, and they are responsible for carrying gases. They are acting as delivery guy for oxygen and carbon dioxide. WBC. Okay. Few WBC, they don't have any special shape. They are amoeboid in nature, right? Like neutrophils, macrophage, so they don't have specific shapes. Now if we talk about platelets, platelets are not true cells, because platelets are basically broken piece of a megakaryocyte, right? So that's why we can say that if we talk about blood, though it's a group of cell, and these cells are similar in origin, and they are floating inside the intercellular matrix called plasma, but the cells will exhibit different function and different structure. Okay, now let's track the history of our tissue. The formation of tissue from the time of embryonic development. Okay, now let's try to imagine all the phenomena which will be happening just from the starting of a life, right? There will be formation of sperm inside male body, formation of sperms inside male body, formation of ovum inside female body, and upon insemination and fertilization, there will be formation of zygote. There will be formation of zygote, first cell of our embryo, first cell of our life. Now gradually the zygotic development will gradually progress, and there will be formation of embryo inside the mother's womb, inside the mother's uterus. Now if you observe this embryo carefully, in the beginning of your life or beginning of our life, inside that embryo you'll be finding 3 layers of tissue are present. Inside that embryo, 3 layers of tissue are present, and we have named them ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm. These are called as embryonic germ layers. The tissue which are present inside embryo during the time of early embryonic development, we named them ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm. Ectoderm means the outer layer of tissue of embryo, mesoderm means the middle layer of tissue of embryo, and endoderm means the inner layer of tissue of embryo. Now gradually the cells of ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm will proliferate, will divide and will form your organs, organ system, and ultimately the complete organism or body. Okay. So based upon the division of labor, the cells or the tissue will proliferate and will adapt their functionality, right? Division of labor means, now inside our body we will be finding different kinds of organ systems. Now those organ systems are made up of different kinds of organs. Those organs are made up of different types of tissue. Those tissue are made up of different types of cells. Okay, now what divides them? It's their function. So that is called the division of labor. That is called the division of labor, that will form the nave of the tissue system. So that's why it will start with cells, and group of cell will form tissue. A group of tissue will form organ. A group of organs will form organ system, and obviously a group of organ system will form an organism. Okay, and if you check inside, if you peep inside that organism, if you check inside your body, you have different tissues and they are performing different functions because their cells are expert in performing those particular functions. If you take out your brain, they are made up of neurons, and those neurons are expert in sensing mechanism, right? If you check your liver, you will get hepatocyte cells and they are expert in detoxifying your body, right? Okay. If you take out the cells of your kidney, inside your kidney you will be finding nephrons, and inside your nephrons you will be finding different kinds of cells, and they are expert in filtrating your blood and forming the urine. So that's called division of labor. Different cells of our body, they are master in performing different functions, and that's what that will the different cells together, the group of cells will be forming tissue, and group of tissue will be forming organs, group of organs will be forming organ system and the organism, right? Okay, now if we check our body, if you take out our all the organs, then we will be finding some basic kind of tissue inside, and those tissues are of 4 types. Yes, those tissues inside our body, there are 4 types. And what are they? First tissue that will appear during the time of embryogenesis or embryonic development, that is called as epithelial tissue. That is called as epithelial tissue. That will form the outer covering of your body. That will form the outer covering and inner lining of your body. And the organs, so we have named that tissue as epithelial tissue, right? The next tissue, the second tissue that will appear inside the during the time of embryonic development, that is called as connective tissue. That is called as connective tissue. And what is the function of this connective tissue? This connective tissue is expert in providing support and link. This connective tissue is expert in providing support and link. Okay. The third tissue that will appear inside your body, that is muscular tissue. Muscular tissue. Okay. Now what is the function of these muscles or this muscular tissue? They will help you in movement and locomotion. Movement and locomotion. And also these muscles helps us to generate heat. That's why when you utilize your muscle, when you exercise, when you do exercise or when you are running, you are utilizing your muscles. Your muscles are continuously contracting and relaxing in a repeated manner, and that's producing heat. So heat generation is another function. Heat generation is another function of your muscles. And the fourth tissue that will appear during the time of your embryonic development, that is the neural tissue. That is the neural tissue or nervous tissue, right? And that is responsible for control, coordination and sensitivity. That will provide you sensitivity. That will help you in control and coordination. Okay, so that's why we got these basic 4 types of tissue by which our organs and systems are made up of. Like if you take out one important organ from your body, that is heart, right? Suppose you have taken out heart from any animal. Now you are observing, you are finding that kind of tissue present into it. So you will be finding the covering of the heart, epithelial tissue you will get inside the heart, connective tissue that's also present inside the heart, muscular tissue, heart will show rhythmic beating movement, lub-dub. So that's due to the presence of special kind of muscles. So muscular tissue also present into heart, and heart is also supplied by your nervous tissue. So I'm talking about only one organ of your body, and that's your heart, and that is made up of all four types of tissue. So again I'm repeating, when nature is forming your body inside your mother's womb, your developmental stage we are calling you as embryo, and the development is called embryonic development or morphogenetic development. So gradually, first the tissue will appear that is responsible for protecting you and acting like a covering, that is called as epithelial tissue. Now what is the second need for your survivability? The second need is to provide connection, to provide connection, to supply nutrients to your each and every cells. So the second need is to produce connective tissue. Third need for an animal, that is to provide movement and locomotion, and for that you need muscles. And the fourth need, after your birth you need to sense the world, and accordingly you need to act, you need to create a response. So for that you will be needing nerves inside your body, and that is made up of neural tissue, and that will form your brain, that will form your spinal cord and other parts of your neural system. Okay, now we'll dive deeper. We want to learn more about these tissues. Okay, now we'll talk about their embryonic origin. Okay, just some minutes ago I was discussing about this diagram. So this is the embryo that is growing inside the mother's womb or uterus, and we checked that the embryo is having three layers: ectoderm and mesoderm and endoderm. And gradually this ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm gonna give rise all those four types of tissue. So from ectoderm, this ectoderm can give rise epithelial tissue as well as neural tissue. This ectoderm can give rise epithelial tissue as well as neural tissue. Mesoderm can give rise epithelial tissue, muscular tissue and connective tissue. And endoderm, the innermost layer, can only give rise, can only form epithelial tissue. So whenever you will be asked what is the embryonic origin, what is the embryonic origin of epithelial tissue, you need to answer it's ecto, meso, endodermal in origin. Epithelial tissue is ecto, meso, endodermal in origin. Means the cells of epithelial tissue will be derived from ectoderm, mesoderm as well as endoderm. Okay. The embryonic origin of connective tissue. Connective tissue is mainly derived from mesoderm. So it's mesodermal in origin. Mesodermal in origin. Now let's talk about muscular tissue, muscles in your body. Most of the muscles, remember not all, most of the muscles, they are also derived from your embryonic mesoderm. So they are mesodermal in origin. Now let's come to the neural tissue. Neural tissue, they are mostly ectodermal in origin. They are derived from embryonic ectoderm. Now we'll be talking about their regeneration capacity. So every time you are fighting with the nature, right? You are fighting with the nature. Every one of us, we are doing struggle for existence, right? And during the time of the struggle, your tissue will get damaged sometime. You will get wound. Now, let's check which of these tissues posing the highest capacity for regeneration, right? The highest capacity of regeneration can be observed into the epithelial tissue, because that will be forming the outer covering or the boundary lining of your body. And the boundary lining of your body is having the highest probability to getting damaged, and that's why that Almighty has provided its highest regeneration capacity. Highest regeneration capacity. That's why when you get a cut on your skin, within few hours, within few days, it will replenish, it will recover by itself. Okay. Connective tissue also has regeneration capacity. Connective tissue also has regeneration capacity. Muscles do have regeneration capacity. Regeneration capacity is present in muscular tissue as well, but you know that your neurons once damaged cannot be regrown, right? So that's why the less power of regeneration is observed in neural tissue. Less regeneration capacity, less regeneration capacity. Okay. Now, is there anybody who is a fan of Marvel or DC? Is there anybody who is fan of Marvel or DC? Watching the movies of Thor, Hulk, Doctor Doom. Is there anybody who is fan of X-Men, Wolverine, Black Panther? Is there anybody who is fan of Marvel and DC? Okay, so if you have watched the movies of Wolverine, whenever Wolverine is getting wound, uh, within few seconds he will repair. Automatically his body is regenerating his cells, right? So basically the Wolverine of our tissues, that can you can compare with that our epithelial tissue. Whenever your cells of epithelial tissues are getting damaged, then gradually your body will start repairing and cell proliferation will replenish or repair that wound or damage. That's why we are telling that they are having highest regeneration capacity. Now we will talk about epithelial tissue in detail. Okay. Now what is the reason behind the nomenclature of epithelial tissue? Okay. Epi means upon and thelia means to grow or to cover. So basically if you talk about your skin, that's growing upon your muscles, that's growing upon your bones, and that's responsible for covering your body. So like that, like your skin, all the epithelial tissue, they are growing over connective tissue and they are giving a protective covering from outside or from inside. They're responsible for making the boundary lining, right? So that's why they got the name epithelial tissue, or simply you can call them epithelium. Okay, so they will be forming either inner or outer boundary lining of our body or our organs. They have highest regeneration capacity, already I've spoken about that. Now, very important line is written here, they are avascular in nature. If you check your skin carefully, okay, beneath the skin you will be finding you have blood vessels, but just at the outermost layer there is no blood vessels can be found. So that's why avascular means absence of blood vessels. Epithelial tissues are not directly supplied with blood vessels. That's why we have named them as avascular or avascular tissue. You need to remember this. Okay. Now, as because they are responsible for forming the outer boundary of your body. Now outer boundary should be very much strong, mechanically it should be very much strong, right? So that's why they are made up of less amount of intercellular matrix. So what is intercellular matrix? Like if you talk about your wall, that is made up of bricks, and in between two brick we will be putting cement, right? So that is acting as intercellular matrix. So when Almighty is forming, making your body, in between the cells, it will be putting intercellular matrix. your body mechanism will be putting intercellular matrix in between the cells, and that will be holding the cells together. But as because the cells of epithelial tissue, they are tightly packed, they are compact in nature, so there will be less amount of intercellular matrix. Less the gap between two cells, less the amount of intercellular matrix. Okay. Now, they always grow upon connective tissue. Now, why it's so? Why epithelial tissue will be growing up on connective tissue? Because they don't have blood supply. They are avascular in nature. But still, after that also, they are in need of nutrients. They are in need of oxygen, right? So that's why they need supply of nutrients and oxygen, and they are taking those supply from underlying connective tissue. That's why always you'll be finding inside your body that epithelial tissues, they are growing upon connective tissue, and that is the scientific reason. Okay, now how they are fetching these nutrients and gases from the underlying connective tissue? With the help of a special basement membrane that links the connective tissue with the epithelium for the supply of nutrients. Okay, now I'll be checking how connective tissue and these epithelial tissue cells are linked with each other. Suppose I'm making a layer of epithelial tissue cells. So all these cells are of epithelial tissue. So this is a layer of epithelial tissue. These are epithelial cells. Okay, and below them, this is the layer of connective tissue. This is the layer of connective tissue. Now, there is a little gap in between connective tissue and epithelial tissue. So that gap will be filled by basement membrane. That gap will be filled by basement membrane. So basement membrane is responsible for connecting connective tissue with epithelial tissue. Okay. Now, though blood vessels are not directly present into the epithelial tissue, but blood vessels have reach in connective tissue, right? Okay. Now, from these blood vessels, the basement membrane will take these nutrients by the process of diffusion and will supply those nutrients or gases to these epithelial cells. So that's how a connection is made, or a link is made between connective tissue and epithelial tissue with the help of this basement membrane. Okay. Now if you check this carefully, the free surface, this is the free surface, or you can call this as apical surface of epithelial tissue, right? And the surface which is attached with this basement membrane, this surface is called as basal surface of this epithelial tissue. Now, very often you will be observing this epithelial surface, they are free surface. They are not attached with any other thing. Okay. Anamika, you want to say something, or you want to ask something? Okay. So here what I am saying, this first layer, they are cells of epithelial tissue. The third layer, this is layer of connective tissue. Now we'll be linking layer 3 to layer 1. For that we got basement membrane. Okay. Now why this link or connection is needed? There is no direct blood supply present inside these epithelial cells, but blood capillaries or blood vessels are present into connective tissue layer. So what will happen? This basement membrane will take nutrients from these blood vessels and will supply them to the epithelial cell, and that's how the epithelial cells will survive. And the free surface of epithelial cells, we call them as apical surface. So the free surface of these cells, we call it as apical surface, and this locked surface, this basal locked surface, is called as basal surface. Now this free surface, if it's present, like if the free surface is your skin, that will either interact with environment, or if that free surface is present inside your body, that will interact with your body fluid, right? Okay. So is there any problem understanding this particular concept, particular topic? Have you got it? Like if you understood this particular topic, you can write down in this comment section, and after that we'll be moving forward to the classification of epithelial tissue. Are you getting it, Anamika, Singh? Okay. Now I'll be classifying epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue that has two types. Epithelial tissue is having two types. One, that is simple epithelium. Simple epithelium. The second type of epithelium tissue, that is compound epithelium. That is compound epithelium. Epithelial tissue has two types, simple epithelium and compound epithelium. Now, what is simple? What is difference between simple and compound epithelium? For that, we have to observe the layers of cells. So for simple epithelium, you will be finding only a single layer of cells. For compound epithelium, you will be finding multiple layers of different kinds of epithelial cells are present. So if epithelial tissue is having multiple layers of cells, that is called as compound epithelium. If epithelial tissue is having only single layer of cells, that is called as simple epithelium. So this is the definition. Yes, Abu Siddiq, very good evening. Shreya, very good evening. Okay. So simple epithelium versus compound epithelium. So what is the basic function of this simple epithelium? Okay. Basic function of simple epithelium, they are acting as diffusion boundary. They are helping us in the process of diffusion. Wherever in your body, inside your body, there will be diffusion going on, like inside your lungs, you have alveoli. And inside your alveoli, air is diffusing, gases are diffusing. That diffusion service will be made by simple epithelium, right? Inside your kidneys, you have nephrons, and there also diffusion and osmosis is going on, and those cells are of simple epithelial kind. Okay. So diffusion, secretion and absorption. Diffusion, secretion, like glands are responsible for secreting material, salivary glands, secreting saliva, right? Now gastric glands, they're secreting gastric juice. So every glands are made up of simple epithelium, right? Okay. Now when you talk about the function of compound epithelium, as because they have multiple layers of cell, they have less function. Compound epithelium, they have less function in diffusion, secretion and absorption. Remember, they are responsible for protection. They are responsible for protection. They are giving protection to you. Okay, by they can protect you against biological stress. They can protect you against mechanical stress. They can protect you against chemical stress. So the basic difference in their functionality is simple epithelium tissue, they are responsible for diffusion, they are specialized for diffusion, secretion and absorption. Compound epithelium tissue, they are specialized to give us protection. Okay. Now, what are the types of this simple epithelium? There are three types based upon the structure of shape of the cells. Okay. Basically, they are squamous epithelium, second cuboidal epithelium, and thirdly columnar epithelium. So based upon the structure of cells, simple epithelium is of three types. Squamous epithelium, they are made up of thin flat cells of irregular boundaries like flotiles. That's why we call them squamous epithelium, cell with flat surface. Cuboidal epithelium, cells are of cube shape. Cells are of cube shape. Cube shaped cells will form this cuboidal epithelium. And for columnar epithelial tissue, you'll be finding slender, tall, elongated column or pillar like cells. So based upon the cellular shape, this simple epithelial tissue is divided into mainly three groups. Okay. Now, what are the subdivision of compound epithelium? Compound epithelium are divided into two types. Compound epithelium, that is divided into two types. First type, that is called transitional compound epithelium, and second type, that is stratified compound epithelium. What is difference between transitional and stratified? These structures, these names are not based upon the structure of the cells they are made up of. Transitional compound epithelium means you'll be finding multiple layers of cell, but in different situation the cells will look different. The cells are having the capability to transit, to change their shape. That's why we are naming them transitional epithelium. Stratified, they are made up of multi-layered cells, but the cells cannot change their shape in different situation. That's why you can call these as non-transitional compound epithelium or simply as stratified, that means multi-layered compound epithelium. Okay, if you have any doubt, okay, till now whatever we have studied, you can write into the comment box. Till now, if you have any doubt from the classification of different types of epithelial tissue, what is the basis of classification of epithelial tissue, what is simple epithelium, what is compound epithelium, what are the main functions of simple epithelium, what is the main function of compound epithelium, what are the main types of simple epithelium, what are the main types of compound epithelium. So, if you have any doubt or if you have any question from this particular topic, you can ask me here into the comment section. Can I know that from which place of India people are watching? Can you comment your location into the comment box? Like I'm taking class from PW studio. So from where you people are watching this video? Okay, so Anamika is saying network problem. No issue, no issue. Once the lecture is over, you can watch this. If you are facing network problem at this moment of time, okay, what about rest of you from where you are watching? Okay, so I'm moving forward with squamous epithelium. The first type of simple epithelium, that is squamous epithelium. So squamous epithelium, that is made by thin flat cells like the tiles, thin flat cells, thin flat cells, and you can observe the boundaries are irregular, with irregular boundary. Okay, now where inside our body exactly you can locate these simple squamous cells? Okay, remember this trick, beta is the trick or mnemonic to remember the examples of simple squamous epithelium. B for Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule. E for endothelium. T for thin part of loop of Henle. A for air sacs or alveoli of lungs. Okay, these four examples are given into our NCERT. Now, who will tell me in the comment section who knows about this Bowman's capsule? Who knows about this Bowman's capsule? Where in our body you will be finding this Bowman's capsule? Who knows about this endothelium? Can anybody tell me what is the meaning of this endothelium? Now, I think most of us, we know that loop of Henle, that's a part of our nephron, the filtrating units of kidney. And I think all of us, we also know that these air sacs of lungs through which we are exchanging air or gases, they are called as alveoli. My question was, who knows about Bowman's capsule and endothelium? Can you give the answer into the comment section? Okay, so Surya, this is a like a lollipop question for you. Surya, I think you are appearing for NEET 2026. So this is basically bridge course, and this is for those students who are freshly coming into class 11, or those who are jumping from class 11 to class 12. Though for those students who are studying in long term or dropper, or those who have already completed class 12th, so this is a lollipop question for them. Bowman's capsule, yes, Bowman's capsule, they are part of the initial cup like part of nephrons. Now who can answer this? What is endothelium? Now I want to check who knows this answer really. Endothelium. Not an issue, Surya. Not an issue. Nothing to say sorry, dear Surya. Okay, Surya, you are from which place? Who knows what is endothelium? Have you ever interacted while you were studying in your NCERT or any biology book? Have you ever seen this terminology? Endothelium. Okay. So, if you don't know, I'm telling the answer. Endothelium is nothing but inner lining of blood vessels. Endothelium is inner lining of blood vessels. So, inner lining of blood vessels, they are made up of endothelium. Brutal beast. For Hindi lectures, we have different channels. This channel is only for English lectures. Okay. Ayush Raj, yes. So I cannot explain in Hindi in this particular class. So if you want Hindi lectures, you can check for other channels. So this is PW English medium. Here the lectures are taken only in English subject, in English medium, for English medium students. Not this channel is not for English subject. This channel is for English medium students who cannot understand English or Hindi lectures. This is for them. Okay. Okay. So what do you want to understand, Ayush? Again, I am repeating it. I was talking about squamous epithelium. This is a kind of simple epithelial tissue, right? Okay. So, why this is called as squamous epithelium? So, whenever you will be checking the cells of your Bowman's capsule or endothelium or the thin part of loop of Henle or cells of your air sacs of lungs, you will be finding the cells are flat and thin in nature with irregular boundaries. So, these flat and thin shaped cells are named as squamous cells, and as because this tissue is made up of this kind of cells, we are naming it as squamous epithelium. Yes. Okay. To understand in proper manner, you have to watch this from the beginning, Mr. Ayush Raj. Okay. So we are done with squamous epithelium. Now we'll be moving forward to cuboidal epithelium. Cuboidal epithelium. So another kind of, the second kind of simple epithelium. Now why it's named as cuboidal? Because the cells are cube shaped. The cells of this tissue, they are cubed shaped. They are made up of cube shaped cells. That's why we call them cuboidal epithelium. So this shape is cube shaped cell, right? Okay. Now what is the function of cuboidal epithelium? Function of cuboidal epithelium is very much important. They are responsible for secretion and absorption. They are responsible for secretion and absorption. Okay. Now what is secretion? What is absorption? Suppose while you are eating food, you are chewing and suddenly you will feel that saliva is coming inside your buccal cavity. So from where the saliva is coming? From the salivary glands. So as because the salivary glands are secreting saliva, you are getting the saliva, you are feeling the saliva slippery substance while you are chewing the food. So that is as a result of secretion of salivary glands. Okay, what is absorption? Upon the digestion inside your digestive canal, right, inside your small intestine, your body is taking back the useful simplified food material, and that is called the process of absorption. I think now you got my point, Mr. Ayush. Okay, so the function of cuboidal epithelium is to help us in secretion and absorption, and then the examples are of cuboidal epithelium. Examples you'll be finding into the renal tubules, renal tubules, that means part of nephron, right? There is a part of nephron that is called PCT. There is a part of nephron that is called DCT. Proximal convoluted tubule, there is a part of nephron. DCT, distal convoluted tubule, this is a part of nephron. Okay, even if you have studied your class 9th and 10th properly, you should know what is PCT and what is DCT. So these structures, they are made up of cuboidal epithelial cells. Okay, where else inside our body you can find cuboidal epithelial cells? Inside your ovary, inside your testes. So inside your ovary and testes, you have cells which are responsible for formation of gametes. So sperms and ovum, they are also derived from cuboidal cells. So that's why the particular cells inside ovary and testes, we call them germinal epithelium. Germinal epithelium. Okay. Now, where else inside our body you can find cuboidal epithelial cells? Okay. So, inside your pancreas, there are some special cells called as pancreatic acini. Pancreatic acini, and these cells are responsible for secretion of pancreatic juice, right? So pancreatic juice is secreted by pancreatic acini, and they are cuboidal epithelial cells. Now, where else we can find cube-shaped cells inside our body? Okay, the duct of glands, duct of glands of your body, they are also made up of cuboidal epithelium, like the small ducts of your salivary gland, small ducts of your pancreas, small ducts of your sweat gland. So small ducts of your glands, they are made up of cuboidal epithelium. Okay, now from this particular topic, if you have any doubt, you can write down into the comment section. I'm talking about cuboidal epithelium, the function and the examples where inside our body we can observe this kind of tissue. Okay, so if you don't have any question, I'll be jumping to the next kind of simple epithelium, that is simple columnar epithelium. Simple columnar epithelium. Okay, now why these are known as columnar? Column means slender and tall cells. The slender, tall, pillar-like cells are called as columnar epithelium. The cells of columnar epithelial tissue. So due to the presence of this particular column or pillar-like cells, we got this name columnar. Right. Now, what you can observe, what is the speciality, uniqueness of this particular cells? You will be finding the nucleus, they are present, the nucleus of these cells, they are present towards the base, towards the basal surface or towards the basal end. That is the uniqueness of this particular cells. Okay. Now, what is the function? What is the function? Now, I'm telling the function is similar to the cuboidal epithelium, that is to help in secretion and absorption. To help in secretion and absorption. Now, if you can ask me, sir, where inside our body this secretion and absorption is done through these columnar cells? Now, if you get inside your intestine, particularly small intestine, so we know that inside our small intestine we have some finger-like projection, and that is called as intestinal villi, right? And they are they're specialized for absorbing the digested food, and the surface of those intestinal villi, they are made of a special kind of columnar epithelial cells. So that is the function of that is one of the function, that is absorption. What is the secretory function of columnar epithelial cells? Again, if we get inside the stomach, if we get inside the intestine, you'll be finding glands are present which are secreting digestive juices, right? So digestive juices are secreted by the glands of stomach and intestine, and those glands are again made up of simple columnar epithelial cells. Okay, so where inside our body we'll be finding simple columnar epithelial cells? So we need to talk about the examples. Inside your stomach, inside your intestine, okay, so inside your stomach, inside your intestine. Someone is saying, sir, math is best. So if you have analytical thinking, you should go for maths. If you love the nature, if you are an explorer, if you really want to explore inside our body, what's happening biologically, the biological science, the story of this life, then you should study with biology. Okay, so columnar epithelial cells can be found inside the stomach, inside the intestine, inside our fallopian tube, inside our fallopian tube, inside respiratory tract, inside respiratory tract, right? So all these examples, for all these structures, you will be finding presence of simple columnar epithelial cells. Okay, so we are done with simple epithelial tissue. Now gradually we will move forward to the next version of simple epithelial tissue, that is modification of simple epithelial cells. Now we have observed cube-shaped cells and column-shaped cells. And we know their name cuboidal and columnar cells. Now if you put microvilli, if you put this finger-like structure over here with one of the surface of these cube-shaped cells, these structures are called as microvilli. They are responsible for increasing the surface area of these cells. These folded parts will be increasing the surface area of these cells. Now we will call this particular cell as brush border cuboidal cell. Now we will call this cell as brush border cuboidal cell. Okay. Now we will take another cuboidal cell here. Now we will take another cuboidal cell here, and I will add some hair-like structure in the apical surface, and these hair-like structures are called as cilia. Now you can name this particular cell as ciliated cuboidal cell. So these are the two different kinds of modification of simple cuboidal cell. Similar kind of modification can be observed with columnar cells as well. You will be finding columnar cells inside your fallopian tube, inside your trachea, inside your respiratory tract. They have cilia. So they are called as ciliated columnar epithelial cells inside your fallopian tube, inside your trachea, right? Okay. Now if these columnar cells are with microvilli, similarly we will be naming them as brush border columnar epithelium. Where inside your body you will be finding brush border columnar epithelium? Inside your intestine. Inside your intestine, you will be finding brush border columnar epithelium. Where inside your body you will be finding ciliated columnar epithelium inside our trachea, means respiratory tract, and inside the fallopian tube of female reproductive system. Inside the fallopian tube of female reproductive system, you will be finding ciliated columnar cells. Okay. Surya is saying math is based in imagination. So obviously there are two lobbies. Few people we are with biology and few people they are with mathematics. Okay. Now if you try searching this brush border cuboidal epithelium, where inside our body you will be finding brush border cuboidal cells inside your nephron. Where inside your nephron? Inside the PCT of nephron, proximal convoluted tubule of nephron. Proximal convoluted tubule of nephron has brush border cuboidal epithelium. Where inside our body you will be finding cuboidal cells with cilia. Okay, ciliated cuboidal cells you can find inside your again inside your nephron, and the part is called as neck of collecting duct of your nephron. Okay, so these are different kinds of modification of cuboidal cells as well as columnar cells. Okay, now we'll talk about another kind of tissue, that is glandular epithelium. Glandular epithelium. Glandular epithelium, that means glands. So basically glands of your body, they are nothing but kind of modified simple epithelium, and these glands are nothing but modified columnar or cuboidal cells. Glands are made up of modified columnar or cuboidal cells. That's because in columnar and cuboidal cells we can find modification like formation of microvilli. Wherever there will be presence of microvilli, that is responsible for either for secretion or for absorption, right? Okay. Now we are going to heading towards glands. Now which kind of columnar and cuboidal tissue are called as glands? Which are specified for secretion. Glands are made for secretion. Salivary glands responsible for secretion of saliva, right? Sweat gland responsible for secretion of sweat. Sebaceous gland responsible for secretion of oil. Earwax, ceruminous gland responsible for secretion of earwax. Gastric gland responsible for secretion of gastric juice, right? So inside of your body, wherever you will be finding gland, they are responsible for secretion of substance. Different glands are modified or master in secretion of different kinds of substance. Okay. Now in our NCERT, we need to talk about, as per our NCERT, we need to talk about two kinds of gland. First, unicellular gland, and secondly, multicellular gland. Now what do you mean by unicellular gland? They are made up of a single cell. A single cell is acting as a gland. An example is goblet cell. Example is goblet cell. Yes. To the inner lining, if you search to the inner lining of your digestive canal, if you search inside the inner lining of your respiratory tract, if you search into the inner lining of your reproductive tract, so remember these three tracts, inner lining of these three tracts, digestive tract, reproductive tract and your respiratory tract, that has this wine glass shaped cells. That has this wine glass shaped cells, and it is responsible for secretion of mucus. It is responsible for secretion of mucus, and because of the shape, we named this unicellular gland as goblet cell. You might have watched that movie Goblet of Fire, right? Goblins. So goblet means wine glass shaped cells which can produce mucus. And there is also example of unicellular gland. Okay. As per NCERT, apart from goblet cell and another cell is there, Paneth cell, all other glands will be considered as multicellular, like your sweat gland, example of multicellular gland, salivary gland, example of multicellular gland, gastric gland, example of multicellular gland, mammary gland, example of multicellular gland, sebaceous gland, example of multicellular gland. All other digestive glands are example of multicellular glands. Okay. Now there is there is a classification of another kinds of gland that is based upon their nature of secretion, that is endocrine gland or exocrine gland, right? Exocrine glands are those glands who have pipeline or duct to secrete their secretion. Like when I was talking about our salivary gland, so salivary gland is producing saliva and sending the saliva inside our buccal cavity with the help of salivary duct. So salivary gland is having duct, and that is a kind of exocrine gland. The glands with the duct system, right, we call them exocrine gland. Okay. Now there is a second kind of gland and they do not have pipeline or duct to secrete their product. So basically if we talk about our hypothalamus, if we talk about our pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, thymus, adrenal gland, right? So all these examples, pituitary, pineal, thymus, thyroid, adrenal, hypothalamus, these are glands. These can produce hormones, but they are not secreted with the help of pipe, with the help of duct. They are secreted directly into the bloodstream. So this ductless gland which are secreting into the bloodstream, they are called as endocrine glands, right? And there is a third kind that has a few secretion they will secrete with the help of duct, and few secretion they will be secreting without duct, like our pancreas. Pancreas can produce hormones, insulin, glucagon, somatostatin. So when pancreas is secreting these hormones, that is releasing them directly into the bloodstream. So that is endocrine nature of pancreas. But when the same pancreas is secreting pancreatic juice, digestive juice, with the help of pancreatic duct, that is the exocrine nature, and that's why pancreas can be considered as heterocrine gland or mixocrine gland or dual gland. So based upon the secretion or crine, based upon the secretion, there are three kinds of glands: endocrine, exocrine and heterocrine. Okay. Now I'll talk about compound epithelium. Now we'll talk about compound epithelium, and as we said, this compound epithelium, they are mainly responsible for giving protection. They have less function. Compound epitheliums, they are multi-layered epithelial cells. They have less function in secretion and absorption. They are mainly responsible for giving us protection. Like your skin is example of compound epithelium. Now as per our NCERT, we need to talk about only two compound epithelium. One is skin and another is the surface of your buccal cavity. Inner surface of your oral or buccal cavity. Okay, so these two are very good example of striated compound epithelium as per NCERT. Okay, now if you check the skin, that has our nails and the hairs. So this hairy or these nails, this hairy appearance or the nails, they are made up of keratin protein. So skin is example of keratinized compound epithelium. But if you check inside your mouth, there is absolutely no disturbance of hair or nails are present. So mouth or surface, inner surface of buccal cavity, that is non-keratinized compound epithelium. Non-keratinized compound epithelium. Now again I am repeating it. If you check your skin, you'll be finding nails and hairs, and they are made up of keratin, right? So as because the cells of skin is having capability to produce keratin, thus this particular tissue, the skin, is a kind of compound tissue, but you can call it keratinized compound epithelium. But if you check inside your mouth, that cannot produce keratin protein, that's why there is no hair, no nails present inside your oral cavity. So you can call it as non-keratinized compound epithelium. And obviously skin, the surface of skin is dry, and the surface of mouth is inner surface of mouth or buccal cavity, that is moist. So if you are asked, give an example of a moist surface with compound epithelium, you need to talk about the buccal cavity. If you are asked to give example of dry surface with compound epithelium, you can give the example, you can take the example of skin. Okay. So overall, that was the thing. Now we have spoken about another kind of compound epithelium, that is transitional compound epithelium. Transitional compound epithelium. Okay. So this particular example is not given in your NCERT, but sometime it is asked, what is transitional compound epithelium? Transition means change in shape. Transition means change in shape. Okay. So the cells of your urinary bladder, the cells of your urinary bladder, the cells of your ureter, the cells of your kidney, pelvic region or renal pelvis, they can change their shape. Like once they will appear columnar in nature, and in the next moment when there is more stretch or less stretch, they will appear cuboidal in nature. So they can change their shape from columnar to cuboidal or cuboidal to columnar based upon the force you are applying on them. So that's why urinary bladder, ureter and the tissue found in renal pelvis, they are called as transitional compound epithelium. Now we will be talking about connective tissue, the most abundant tissue found inside your body. Everywhere inside our body we have connective tissue. If you talk about bones, they are connective tissue. If you talk about cartilages, they are connective tissue. If you talk about blood, there is connective tissue. If you talk about lymph, that is connective tissue. If you talk about fat inside our body, that's also connective tissue. Okay, so that's why NCERT is saying that most abundant and widespread tissue. Okay, as the name of this tissue is suggesting, it gives support, linking and also act as a framework of our body. If we talk about your bone, that is the framework of your body. Okay, what do you mean by framework? Is the shape of your skeleton, that is giving the shape of your body structure. So that's why we are saying connective tissue is also responsible for giving us framework. Okay. Connective tissue is also having regeneration capacity, but not as high as the epithelial tissue. Highest regeneration capacity is possessed by epithelial tissue, but very good regeneration capacity also exhibited by connective tissue as well. Okay. Now we need to check the components of a classic connective tissue present inside our body. Right. Okay. So there are three components you will be finding inside connective tissue. Some cells really they are very much important for the functionality of connective tissue. Fibers, and the fibers are held together inside a jelly kind of structure that is called as ground substance or intercellular matrix. So these three are the components of connective tissue. Okay. Now the main cells of connective tissue, the prime cell of connective tissue, we call them as fibroblast. Very important cells for connective tissue, because the fibroblast cell, they are responsible for formation of these fibers and ground substance. Again I am repeating, fibroblast cells of connective tissue, they are the specialized cells for secretion of fibers and ground substance. Now some other cells also you'll be finding inside connective tissue, like macrophage and neutrophils. Now what are these macrophage and neutrophils? They are phagocytic WBC. Whenever your tissue will be facing any kind of infection or pathogenic attack by bacteria or virus, they will get activated. First your body will activate neutrophil, then a macrophage will also come, and they will fight with the germs, fight with the bacteria or the pathogen, and they will engulf that like an amoeba. So that's why these macrophages and neutrophils are amoeboid in nature or phagocytic in nature. Now you'll be finding adipocyte cells. They are special fat storage, right? So fat storing and fat forming cells are called as adipocytes. Okay. Plasma cells are also found in connective tissue. What is the function of plasma cells? They are also special kind of WBC. Remember, plasma cells are also special kind of WBC, special kind of lymphocytes. They are responsible for formation of immunoglobulins or antibodies inside your tissue, right? Antibodies are very crucial for our immune system. Okay. Now another very important cell you will be finding inside your connective tissue, that is mast cell. Okay. Now what is the function of mast cell? Mast cell, they will be secreting three crucial chemical components for our body. First component secreted by mast cell, that is heparin, and heparin is very much necessary because that is acting as anticoagulant. It's because of heparin, the secretion of mast cell, your blood is not getting coagulated or clotted inside your blood vessels. Two more things are secreted by mast cell. One is serotonin and another is histamine, right? Serotonin and histamine. Okay. Now this histamine is acting as vasodilator, serotonin is acting as vasoconstrictor. Serotonin is acting as a vasoconstrictor. They are constricting, they are squeezing your blood vessel, and histamine, they are acting as a vasodilator, they are dilating, relaxing the muscles of your blood vessels, okay, whenever it's needed. Okay. So these are some important cells we find inside connective tissue. Now fibers, three kinds of fibers are secreted by fibroblast, and you need to know their name. First, the most abundant fiber made up of collagen protein, and they are collagen fiber. Okay. Yellow colored fiber called elastic fiber, and little bit blackish fiber, that is acting as a network kind of fiber present inside our connective tissue, that is called as a reticular fiber. Okay. Collagen fiber or white fibers, elastic fibers or yellow fibers, and reticular fibers. These three kind of fibers are present in connective tissue. Okay. Now what is ground substance? As I said, the jelly like matrix which will be holding all these fibers and cells together, and they are made up of hyaluronic acid, a special kind of polysaccharide, or mucopolysaccharide. Okay, so ground substance is made up of hyaluronic acid and mucopolysaccharides. So this is a basic diagram given in your NCERT, basic diagram of areolar tissue, which is a classic example of connective tissue. Okay. Now three kinds of fibers are exhibited here. So the most abundant fibers present into our body that is collagen fiber, that is made up of collagen protein, the most abundant protein found in animal kingdom. Now, as you can see here, this is unbranched, white colored fiber, white colored, unbranched, and inelastic fiber. Like a rubber band, you cannot stretch it. But when you talk about elastic fiber, they are yellow in color, they have branch, so branched yellow colored fiber and with elasticity. That's why they got this name elastic fiber, and they are made up of elastin protein. Now the third kind of fiber, that is called as reticular fiber. Why they are named as reticular? They are made up of reticulin protein, and they will form mesh or network like appearance. That's why they are named as reticular fiber. And you need to remember this particular crucial thing: reticulin is nothing but one form of modified collagen. So these three are the fibers present inside our body. Okay. Now, classification of connective tissue. As per NCERT, if you have studied your NCERT proper way, as per NCERT, there are three types. There are three types of connective tissue you'll be finding inside your body, or I'll be finding inside my body. Who are they? What are they? First, loose connective tissue. Second, dense connective tissue, and thirdly, specialized connective tissue. Okay. Now, what is special about this specialized connective tissue that is not present into loose or dense? So whatever components we were talking about, the cells, the fibers and the matrix, mostly you'll be finding them into loose or dense connective tissue. But when you talk about this specialized connective tissue, they have some special kind of cells and matrix other than those fibroblasts, adipocytes, or plasma cells, lymphocytes, macrophage, neutrophils. They have some special kind of cells and special kind of matrix. That's why they are named as specialized connective tissue. Okay. Now, let's check what do you mean by loose connective tissue. Now, loose connective tissue means the presence of cells, the ratio of cell, fiber and matrix. Ratio of cells, fibers and matrix will decide either the connective tissue is loose or dense in nature. So if there is more matrix and less fibers and cells, if the connective tissue is having more matrix and less fibers or cells, we call that as a loose connective tissue. And if the connective tissue is having more fibers and cells and less matrix, we call that connective tissue as dense connective tissue. You got it? Okay. Now, two classic examples of loose connective tissue: areolar tissue, that's often called as cementing tissue, right? Wherever inside your body there is a air space or empty area in between two different tissues, that will be filled by this areolar tissue. So the empty areas in between the tissues are filled by this particular tissue. That's why we got the name areolar tissue, right? Okay, where inside your body you will be finding this areolar tissue? Beneath the skin. Beneath the skin you can get areolar tissue. Adipose tissue, again another tissue you can find beneath the skin, right? Adipose tissue also. Adipose tissue means fat tissue, as because they are made up of special kind of cells called as adipocyte cell. Adipocyte cells, they are responsible for secretion, formation and storage of fat or lipids. That's why they are named as adipocyte. And whenever a tissue is rich with adipocytes, we call it fat tissue or adipocyte tissue. And we know that fat is responsible for is a storage. Fat is nothing but storage of energy. Whenever you are fasting, your body will be breaking down the fat particles gradually and will be producing energy for you. And also fat is acting as insulator. Fat is acting as insulator. Okay. So as per the informations given in NCERT, that's all about areolar tissue and adipose tissue. But if we dive deeper, I'm extremely sorry. if we check in more depth, if you want to know about this adipose tissue or fat, there are two kinds. There are two kinds of fats present into our body. One is brown fat and another is white fat. One is brown fat, another is white fat. Okay. The fat present inside us, adult human being, that is white fat. The brown fat you'll be finding inside newborn babies or infants. Now, what is difference between white fat and brown fat? You need to check the cell. You need to check the adipocyte. Okay. So, if you check the adipocyte of white fat, this is the nucleus, and you'll be finding a large a large globule or vesicle of fat is present inside that. That is called as monolocular adipocyte, right? Now, this kind of adipocyte cells, they have less mitochondria inside them, and due to the special cytochrome, special molecule secreted by mitochondria, that is called cytochrome, few other fat cells will appear reddish or brownish in color. Now, as because the 95% of the space of this fat cell, they are occupied by this fat globule or fat vesicle, there is less mitochondria. If there is less mitochondria, there will be no production of those cytochrome and there will be no reddish or brownish color. So, that's why the white fat, if you check white fat, you'll be finding this kind of cells. Okay. Now, if you check brown fat, this is the nucleus, and you will be finding some smaller fat globules or fat vesicles are scattered inside the cytoplasm. Okay. Now, that retains space for mitochondria, and as I said, is the mitochondria cell organelles which will be secreting some cytochromes, and that will attract blood vessels towards these particular cells, and that's why they look brownish in nature. Okay. So, that's the basic difference between brown fat and white fat, and you can guess now, as because there is more number of mitochondria present into this multilocular fats or brown fats, the energy value is more for brown fat and the energy value is less for white fat. Okay. Now, let's check the dense connective tissue. As we are saying that dense connective tissue, that means they have more fibers and cells and less matrix, as simple as that. Okay. But this dense connective tissue are of two types. First, dense irregular connective tissue. Second, dense regular connective tissue. Now, what is difference between dense irregular and dense regular? What is difference between dense irregular, dense regular? Let's check that. So, we have taken slides of one dense regular tissue and one dense irregular tissue. Okay. Suppose this is the matrix or ground substance. Now, for one slide, you are observing cells are arranged in a proper manner. With fibers. This fibroblast cells with fibers, they are arranged in a proper manner inside the tissue. We'll name them as dense regular. We'll name these as dense regular connective tissue, this regular appearance of fibroblast cells and fibers. Okay. Now, for dense irregular tissue, these fibroblast cells and fibers, they are haphazardly spreaded here and there. There is no proper orientation, no regular orientation. So that's why we'll call these as dense irregular connective tissue. So there is a difference between dense regular and dense irregular connective tissue. And where inside your body you will be finding dense regular connective tissue, tendons and ligaments. Tendons or ligaments are example of dense regular connective tissue. What is tendon and what is ligaments? Okay, the difference between tendons and ligaments is like that. Tendons are responsible for connecting bone to muscle. Ligaments are responsible for connecting bone to bone. So both of them are fibrous in nature, but tendons are rich in collagen fiber and ligaments they are rich ligaments they are rich in elastic fiber, right. So tendons and ligaments both are dense regular fibrous connective tissue. Tendons are responsible for connecting bone to muscles. Ligaments they are responsible for connecting bone to bone. Now as because tendons are associated with muscles and muscles already have this elasticity, so they don't need elasticity really. That's why tendons are made up of inelastic collagen fiber, and ligaments they are responsible for joining one bone to another bone. Whenever there will be movement into our body, into the junction, okay, they need to provide flexibility. Who? I'm talking about tendons. So this fibrous regular connective tissue, they have more amount of elastin fiber, so that's why they are yellowish in nature. So that's why often tendons are called as white fibrous tissue and ligaments are often called as yellow fibrous tissue. Okay, and where inside your body you will be finding dense irregular connective tissue. They are responsible for making the outermost covering of internal organs along with the epithelial tissue. Already we know that epithelial tissue is responsible for making the outer covering and inner lining. Along with the outer covering of epithelial tissue, dense irregular connective tissue, they also take part in making the outer covering. If we talk about the outer covering of our heart, that is called as pericardium. So that has different layers, few layers that will be made up of simple squamous epithelium and few layers that will be made up of dense irregular connective tissue. What do you call the outer layer of kidney? Capsule. So one layer of that capsule that is also made up of dense irregular connective tissue. What do you call the outer covering of your liver? Gleason's capsule. That's also made up of dense irregular connective tissue. What do you call the outer covering of your bone? Outer covering of your cartilage? Periosteum and perichondrium. Periosteum is the outer covering of your bone. Perichondrium is the outer covering of your cartilages. So that periosteum and perichondrium, that is also made up of dense irregular connective tissue. So along with epithelial tissue, it's the dense irregular connective tissue that's also will be making or forming the outer covering of our internal or visceral organs. Okay. Now we'll talk about specialized connective tissue. As I was discussing, they're made up of special kind of cells and matrix. They're made up of special kind of cells and matrix. That's why they got the name specialized connective tissue. Okay. Now inside our body we have two different kinds of specialized connective tissue. For forming the framework we have skeletal connective tissue, okay, and acting as the medium of transportation we have fluid connective tissue. Okay, sometimes this fluid connective tissue is also called as false connective tissue. Sometimes this fluid connective tissue is also called as false connective tissue. Sometimes this fluid connective tissue is also called as afibrous connective tissue. Why so? Okay, first discuss why fluid connective tissue are also called as afibrous or afibrous connective tissue. Afibrous means there is no fibrous, there is no fiber. Well, I am coming with that. Dipti, the diagram of heart, I am coming with that. Okay, right now I am discussing the topic of animal tissue, right. So afibrous means there is absence of fiber. So if we talk about loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue or skeletal connective tissue, everywhere you are going to find either collagen fiber or elastic fiber or reticular fiber. But for fluid connective tissue, that is blood and lymph, as because that's a fluid, due to the presence of the fluidity, the liquid matrix, there is no presence of fibers. Fibers are absent in blood and lymph, that's why we call them a fibrous connective tissue, right? Now, why it's called as false connective tissue? For other connective tissue types, the matrix is produced by its own cells. Like if we talk about the areolar tissue, the matrix of areolar tissue will be formed by fibroblast cell. The matrix of tendons and ligaments or dense irregular connective tissue, that will also produced by the fibroblast cell. The matrix of bones will be produced by osteoblast cells. The matrix inside the cartilage, that will be produced by chondroblast cells. But the matrix of blood or lymph, that is called plasma, that is not produced either by RBC, WBC or platelet. Rather, the matrix of blood and plasma, which we call lymph, which we call plasma, that is produced by some other organ, some third party organ. You can say there is either liver or spleen. So, if you are observing a particular connective tissue and the matrix is produced by some other organ, then you will be classifying, you will be calling, you will be naming that connective tissue as false connective tissue. Okay. So, we are done with the classification of connective tissue. We are done with the classification of connective tissue. Now, I'll discuss a little bit more about this bones and cartilage. Okay. So, what is the basic difference between bone and cartilage? Is there matrix and pliability? Is there matrix and pliability? Okay. So, the bones are rigid in nature and non-pliable in nature. Means there is no flexibility, no bendability you will be finding when you are studying a bone. But when you are studying any of the cartilage, like the ear pinna or the nose tip or your intervertebral disc, it is bendable, right? So that is due to the pliability. So cartilage has pliability, bone is non-pliable. Okay. Now, why cartilage is pliable but bone is non-pliable? Due to the presence of special kind of matrix. Due to the presence of special kind of matrix. Now, we need to check for the components of the matrix of bone as well as cartilage. So, when you are checking the matrix of bone, that is made up of calcium salts. That is made up of calcium salts, and you will be finding some organic compound called as usine or usine. Okay. Now, when you are checking the matrix of cartilage, right, in detail, then you can observe the matrix of cartilage, that is made up of chondroitin salt, chondroitin salts and chondrine as organic component. So that is the difference. So this calcification, wherever there will be deposition or accumulation of calcium salt like calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, that will make the structure rigid and non-pliable. Wherever there will be deposition of chondroitin sulfate or other chondroitin salts, that will make the structure slightly pliable, but that will be resisting the compression. That's why it's said about cartilage that they are slightly pliable in nature, but they will resist compression due to the presence of special kind of matrix that is made up of chondroitin salts and chondrine. Okay. Now, obviously, if there is matrix, there will be some special kind of cells Obviously some cells are responsible for secreting this matrix, right? So we'll try to find the special kind of cell we're gonna get inside bone. So these cells are called as osteoblast and osteoclast. Similarly, the cartilage, they have special kind of cells called as chondroblast and chondroclast. You know that the study of bone is called as osteology. If you are if you will do specialization on bone, then I will call you as osteologist. If you are a master of cartilage, then you are a chondrologist, right? So osteoblast cell, what is the function of osteoblast cell? Osteoblast cell that is responsible for forming the bone, osteoclast cell that is responsible for demineralizing the bone, breaking the bone. So bone forming cells are called as osteoblast, bone destroying, bone eating cells are called as osteoclast. Okay. Later on, these osteoblast cells are called nothing, osteocytes. Osteocytes. Okay. Similarly, these chondroblast cells can also be called later as chondrocytes. Chondrocytes. Chondroblast, they are responsible for making the cartilage. Chondroclast, they are responsible for breaking the cartilage. And one more thing, one more information about this cartilages. They are also kind of avascular tissue. Okay, there will be no blood vessel. There is absence of blood vessel inside this cartilage matrix. So epithelial tissue and cartilages are example of avascular tissue. Okay. So that was basic difference between bone and cartilage. Now we are moving forward to the next topic. Now until now, if you have any doubt, if you have any question to ask, you can write down into the comment section. Okay, Anamika is saying math is best and you like bio as well. So Anamika, from where you were and like how you manage like preparation of mathematics as well as biology in simultaneous manner? So the third kind of tissue we are will be studying about, that is the muscular tissue or the muscles. Muscular tissue or muscles, and as we already discussed that this muscular tissue or muscles, they are originated, they are derived from embryonic mesoderm. Most of the muscles, except most of the muscles, focus it very carefully, listen it very carefully, most of the muscles of our body except the muscles of our iris and the muscles of our ciliary body, everything, those two muscles, they are present inside our eyes. So apart from these two muscles, iris, muscle of iris and muscle of our ciliary body of our eyes, apart from these two, all the muscles are made of or originated from the embryonic mesodermal germ layer, right? Okay. Now the primitive means muscle forming cells are called as myoblast cells. Muscle forming cells are called as myoblast cells, right? Now gradually from this proliferation of this myoblast cell, our body will be developing three kind of muscle. What are they? First, skeletal muscle. Second, visceral muscle. And third, cardiac muscle. So there are three kinds of muscles are present inside our body. Okay. Now, what is the basis of classification of muscle? Their location inside, right? The skeletal muscle, by the name you can guess that these are the muscles present upon or associated with our skeleton. The bicep, the tricep, these are example of skeletal muscle because they are associated with your bones, your skeleton. Visceral muscle, they are associated with your internal organs. So the wall of hollow internal organs, generally we call them visceral organs. So the wall of visceral organs, they have this visceral muscle. And obviously cardiac means heart. The muscle of heart, the special kind of musculature present into our heart, that is called as cardiac muscle. So that is the basis of classification of muscle, their location. Okay. Now these skeletal muscles, they are striated in nature. Visceral muscle, they are smooth in nature. Cardiac muscle, they are also striated in nature. Now what do you mean by striated and smooth? If you check them carefully, if you observe the muscle cell of skeletal, one single muscle cell of skeletal muscle, you will be finding some alternative dark and light banding on it with multiple nucleus. So this dark light banding pattern is called as striation. That's why skeletal muscle cells are also called as striated muscle. Okay. Now if you check this smooth muscle cell or visceral muscle cell, they look like this spindle. You can also call this shape as fusiform shape or tapered shape. And the cytoplasm is free of such banding. There is no stripe or striation present inside. That's why it's called as smooth muscle. Okay. Now let's check cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle, they are a very special kind of muscle. They have branches. They are branched muscles. Cardiac muscles, they are branched muscle with single nucleus but with stripe or striation. Okay. So if you are asked unbranched striated muscle, then you need to answer skeletal muscle. If you are asked branched striated muscle, then you need to answer cardiac muscle. Okay. Visceral, smooth because there is no presence of stripe or striation. Okay. Now we will talk about their control. Who is controlling these muscles? If a muscle is listening to you, if your muscle is listening to you, then we call that muscle as voluntary muscles. If the muscle is not listening to you, then we call that as involuntary muscles. Now, just try to imagine if you are giving command to your biceps or triceps and you can move your hand. You can blink your eyes, you can chew your food. So, everything that's controlled by your will and wish, and that is the reason. Yes, Mr. Zalmi Play 01. Yes. So I was talking about the control of skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle literally listening you. Whenever you are giving command, they are under your will and wish, right? You can move your hand, blink your eyes, or you can talk. So these are voluntary muscle. These are voluntary muscles. But visceral muscles, the muscles of your esophagus, the muscles of your stomach, whenever you are engulfing food and you are digesting, your alimentary canal will perform peristalsis movement and you cannot control that. That movement of your alimentary canal will not listen to you, that's not under your will and wish. So that kind of control is called as involuntary control. Involuntary control. Similarly, the cardiac muscle, there is also involuntary in nature. Smooth muscles, that is also involuntary in nature. So again, if you are asked involuntary striated muscle, that means cardiac muscle. Involuntary non-striated muscle or involuntary smooth muscle, visceral muscle, right? Voluntary striated muscle, skeletal muscle. So in different manner you have to twist the sentences, is because you know that the recent trend, if you check the previous 5-6 years questions, right, you are getting statement based, assertion reason. Okay, that's why while you are studying a particular concept, you need to twist it in your own way so that you can crack the mentality of the paper setter. Okay, so that was in a brief about the muscular tissue. Now we are going towards the neural tissue or nervous tissue. Neural tissue or nervous tissue. Neural tissue or nervous tissue is responsible for sensitivity, control and coordination, and that is made up of mainly two components. One, the structural and functional unit of nervous system, that is neurons. And the second kind of cells, we call them neuroglia, neuroglial cells. So these two are the components of neural tissue, neuroglial cells and neurons. What is the difference between neuron and neuroglial cells? Okay, one is acting as the insulator, that is neuroglial cell. They are providing nourishment, they are repairing damaged part of your nerves, and these neurons are responsible for receiving the signal. We call them stimuli or stimulus, conducting the signal inside your body. So inside your body you have electric circuit, electrochemical circuit, and that electrochemical circuit of your body is called as nervous system, and that is made up of near about 100 billions of neurons. So that's why we call them as structural and functional unit of nervous system, right? Okay, now as per our syllabus, we need to study the diagram, the basic diagram of neurons. I think most of you already have drawn it multiple times, the structure of neuron. So it has a cell body, and the processes. So these short processes are called dendrites. This is the cell body, it is having one nucleus, multiple mitochondria inside it, and also aggregation of ribosomes that we call Nissl granules or Nissl bodies. So basic three part of neuron, the main cell that is called as cell body, the smaller branch structure, these are called as dendrites, this large nearly unbranched structure, that is called as axon, and the end button like structure, that is called as axon terminal. That is called as axon terminal, and these buttons over here, the end part, these are called as synaptic knob. Synaptic knob, and these synaptic knobs are filled with vesicles of neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, like GABA. Okay, so it is the function of dendrites. From the previous neurons, the dendrites will be receiving the signal or the stimuli, and after receiving the signal, the duty of this cell body is to convert it into electrochemical impulse, we call it nerve impulse, and that will be conducted through this axon, right? Okay, so who is receiving the signal? Dendrites. who is delivering the signal? Axon. So that's why sometimes the another name of dendrites is like that. Sometimes we call the dendrites as the afferent arm of neuron, and the name of axon is called as the efferent arm of neuron. The receiving arm, dendrite or afferent arm. The delivering arm, axon or the efferent arm. Okay. Now these special particles you are finding present inside these cell bodies, they are group of ribosomes. We call them Nizel's granules. Nizel's granules. So if someone asks you what is the function of Nizel granules of neuron? What is the function of Nizel granule of a neuron? Then you need to answer, they are nothing but group of ribosomes. So the basic function is to synthesis protein, right? Okay. Now this axon is not naked like this. These are wrapped by special cells, special neuroglial cells. This axon, they are wrapped by special neuroglial cells. These are wrapped by special neuroglial cells, and these neuroglial cells are called as Schwann cell. Schwann cell, or sometime the cells which are wrapping the axon, you can we call them as oligodendrocyte. Oligodendrocyte. If this is the neuron of peripheral nervous system, the cells which will be wrapping the axon, they are Schwann cell. If this is the neuron of central nervous system, then the oligodendrocyte cells will be wrapping this axon part, right? Okay. And sometime, not every time, sometime this Schwann cell or oligodendrocyte cells, they will be secreting a special kind of lipid which we call sphingomyelin or simply myelin, and that will be forming another layer of covering. We call it as myelin sheath. Myelin sheath. So myelin sheath cannot be produced by Schwann cells or oligodendrocyte cells. But important thing is that either it's a myelinated neuron or a non-myelinated neuron, always the axon is wrapped by either Schwann cell or oligodendrocyte cell. Where will you finding Schwann cells? If the neurons are of peripheral nervous system. If the neuron is present into your brain or spinal cord, that is in central nervous system, the axon is always wrapped by oligodendrocyte. And if they are secreting special kind of lipid, there is a kind of lipid that is called as sphingolipid. We call it myelin, and the myelin covering is called as myelin sheath. And the gap in between two myelin coverings, if you are finding a gap or non-myelinated portion, that is called as node of Ranvier. Node of Ranvier, there is nothing but a non-myelinated segment of axon for a myelinated neuron. Okay, so that was very basic or a brief about the structure of neurons, the structural and functional unit of life. Now if you ask me, sir, what is the difference between myelinated neuron and non-myelinated neuron? Obviously, when these neurons are conducting nerve impulse or electrochemical signals, if the axon is myelinated, that will conduct fast, but if the axon is non-myelinated, that will conduct slow. So myelinated neurons are faster neurons, non-myelinated neurons are slower neurons in comparison. Okay. Now if we talk about different types of neuron based upon their shape. Okay. In animal kingdom, you can find neurons without axon and dendron. They are called as apolar neuron. But listen to me very carefully that these apolar neurons are not present into human being. Even even during the time of our embryonic developmental phases. Okay. Second kind of neuron, unipolar neurons. Unipolar neurons. This is a unipolar neuron with axon but no dendrite. That is called as unipolar neuron. Do we have unipolar neuron? No. As of now, in our body, we don't have unipolar neuron, but during the time of our embryonic development, which we call morphogenesis or embryogenetic phase, we had some unipolar neuron, but gradually they will undergo modification, and these unipolar neurons will be modified into either bipolar neuron or multipolar neuron. Okay. And the third type, that is bipolar neuron. Bipolar neuron means the cell body with one dendrite and one axon. That's why we are naming it as bipolar neuron. Where inside your body you will be finding this bipolar neuron? The retina of your eye, you have bipolar neuron. The olfactory epithelium of your nose, you have bipolar neuron. Okay. Inside your even inner ear, so your nose, inside your nose, eye and ear, you will be finding some bipolar neurons. Okay. Now, the most prevalent, the majority of the neurons of our central nervous system, like our cerebral cortex, that is multipolar neuron. The neuron, just in the previous slide we were drawing, that's a multipolar neuron with multiple dendrites and axon, right? So this is a multipolar neuron, and this is the most prevalent neuron of our body, the cerebral cortex. The most of the parts of our central nervous system, they are made up of this kind of neuron. Okay. Now, if you search carefully inside our body, you will be finding another modified version of bipolar neuron, and that looks like this. The cell body, the dendrite and the axon. Okay. So, if you superficially if you observe this, you will think the neuron is having only one axis, right? But actually this is the dendrite, this is the axon. Actually, technically, this is a bipolar neuron. This is a bipolar neuron, but as because this dendrite and axon, they are situated in the same axis, under microscope it appears to be unipolar. So that's why we name this as pseudo unipolar neuron. Pseudo unipolar neuron. Now, is there any existence of this kind of pseudo unipolar neuron inside our body? Yes, exactly, certainly. The dorsal arm of our spinal nerve, listen carefully, the dorsal arm, this is the dorsal side. So, some dorsal sensory arm of our spinal nerve, they are actually pseudo unipolar type. So, again I am recapping. In our body, we don't have apolar neuron. So, where inside inside any animal are they present or not? Yes, in some primitive animals. If you check inside hydra, jellyfish like Cnidaria, Ctenophora, right? Inside Cnidaria and Ctenophora, you may get apolar neuron. The poriferans like sponges, they don't have neurons inside their body. Okay. Unipolar neurons are found during the time of embryogenetic phase of human being, but when our body is matured, these unipolar neurons will be modified in either into bipolar or multipolar or pseudo unipolar type, right? Okay. So, unipolar neurons, they are present during the time of embryonic phase. Bipolar neurons, they are present into our eyes, ear and nose. Multipolar neuron. Multipolar neurons, you will be finding them inside our central nervous system like cerebral cortex, and pseudo unipolar neurons, they are nothing but modified version of bipolar neurons, and you will be finding them into the dorsal sensory arm of spinal nerve. So that was all about animal tissue, and we are moving forward to human physiology. Now from animal tissue, if you have any question or any doubt when you ask here, I will be happy to answer. Okay, so please feel free to ask question or doubt or any topic you want to understand once again, you want to recap once again. Happily I will be elaborating that. You can write down your comment into the comment box, into the chat box. So when we are talking about human physiology, these are the chapters. There are 6 chapters overall we need to complete, starting with breathing and exchange of gases, where we deal with respiratory system, then body fluids and circulation, where we need to deal with circulatory system, transportation system of our body, then excretory products and their elimination, will be dealing with excretory system, then locomotion and movement. There is a chapter dedicated to discuss muscular system as well as skeletal system, and the last 2 chapters of human physiology of class 11, there is neural control and coordination and chemical coordination and integration. They are dedicated to discuss about our nervous system as well as endocrine system. Okay, so first let's talk about breathing. Chapter breathing and exchange of gases, we need to talk about breathing. Okay, so what is difference between breathing and respiration? What is the definition of breathing? Okay, so basically it's a kind of exchange process of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The exchange process of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen of atmosphere is exchanged with the cellular carbon dioxide, which is produced as a result of intercellular respiration, and that whole process is mediated by our respiratory machine, that is our lungs and the respiratory tree. So basically some mechanical process going inside our body. So breathing, that's a mechanical process, and there are 2 steps. We are intaking air, that is inhalation or inspiration, and we are releasing the foul air, that is expiration or exhalation. Now when we are performing inhalation and exhalation, the inhalation is called as active process and the exhalation is called as passive process. So that is a brief about breathing. Okay, there is no chemical change is occurring, right? While our body is performing breathing, there will be no chemical change taking place. But respiration is a separate subject, a separate terminology, often used interchangeably with the terminology breathing. But what is the actual meaning of respiration? Respiration is actually biochemical process, kind of catabolism. It's happening inside our each and every cell. By the process of breathing, we are intaking oxygen, and our body is supplying that oxygen to the tissue and the cells, and the oxygen upon going inside the cell, breaking down the cellular food material directly or indirectly to produce carbon dioxide, water and energy. So it's a destructive process happening inside our each and every cells to produce energy. So that's why respiration is a kind of catabolism or catabolic process. And the steps of respiration, they are glycolysis, Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. And there is a dedicated chapter you will be finding in NCERT where we will be talking about this particular topic, right? So in this chapter, breathing and exchange in gases, if you observe, if you studied it carefully, we are always talking about the mechanism of breathing. We are studying about the respiratory system inside our body. Okay, so this is a whole and soul brief look of the respiratory system and the phases, what's happening inside while you are inhaling air or exhaling air. Okay, so the method of intaking air or releasing air, that's called as pulmonary ventilation. Pulmonary ventilation. Simply we call it as breathing, intaking, inhalation, releasing, exhalation. Okay. Now through the nasal passage, it will enter into the respiratory tract. It will enter into the respiratory tract inside our body, then through trachea, bronchi and bronchioles, it will reach inside some balloon like structure inside our lungs, and they are the place, these alveoli, the balloon like structures, gaseous exchange will be occurring, right? Okay. So the gaseous exchange in between the alveolar air, the gaseous exchange in between the alveolar air and our blood, that is simply called as diffusion. It is simply called as diffusion. Now, while diffusion is happening in between the alveolar air and blood, what's happening actually? Blood is unloading carbon dioxide and oxygen is loaded inside the blood, and this oxygen loaded blood is called as oxygen rich, O2 rich blood or oxygenated blood. Okay. Now this oxygen rich blood will be sent to the left side of our heart, and the left ventricle will pump, and the force produced by the left ventricle will help us to circulate this oxygen rich blood throughout the organs and tissue of our body. So here if we talk about the liver, our systemic artery, the branch of systemic artery will be fetching this oxygenated blood towards the tissue, and oxygen will be unloaded here and carbon dioxide will be loaded again into the blood, and that will make the blood carbon dioxide rich or deoxygenated. So second time, diffusion is happening in between blood and our tissue. Right? And what is the function of blood? Sometimes we are calling the blood as oxygen rich blood, sometimes we are calling the blood as carbon dioxide rich blood. So basically blood is providing the medium of transportation of gases. So the first step of respiration can be said like that: the breathing process or the pulmonary ventilation, where our body is exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide with atmosphere and inside, right? Second phase of our respiration is diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide in between alveoli and the blood. Now, what's happening here, which is loaded and which is unloaded? Near to the alveoli, carbon dioxide is unloaded from your blood and oxygen is loaded into your blood, that is making the blood oxygenated. Now the third phase, the transportation of oxygen or the gases with the help of our transporting vehicle, that is the blood. Blood is transporting via the heart and delivering the oxygen to the tissue. Now again, when we are reaching to the tissue, there will be the fourth phase, the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide in between the blood and the cells. Now here, who is getting loaded and who is getting uploaded? Near to the tissue, oxygen is getting unloaded from blood and carbon dioxide is getting loaded into the blood, and that's making the blood CO2 rich or deoxygenated blood. Now upon going inside, what will be the duty of oxygen? Upon going inside the cell, oxygen will be breaking down the glucose and other food materials to produce energy by the catabolic process, to produce energy by the process of catabolism called intercellular respiration. So the fifth phase of respiration is the intercellular respiration. Intercellular respiration, or the utilization of oxygen by the cell. Okay. Now, if we talk about our respiratory system, we'll start with the external nair or external nostril. Inside the nose, this is the nasal chamber. The nasal chamber is divided into two nasal passage separated by the nasal bones. Okay. Now, if you get inside, suddenly the end part of nose, that we'll call as the internal nostril. The end part of nose, that is called as internal nostril or internal nair. Okay. Now somewhere in between the internal nair and this nasal passage, you will be finding a place where your body is perceiving the sense of smell, that is called as olfactory epithelium. Okay. Now what after this internal nair, your oral cavity is merging with this respiratory passage, and the junction of your oral cavity and your respiratory passage, that is called as pharynx. Now this pharynx is having three zones. The pharynx towards the internal nostril, that is called as nasopharynx. The pharynx towards the oral cavity, that is called as oropharynx, and the pharynx towards the larynx, that is called as laryngopharynx. Okay. Now there will be bifurcation here. The dorsal segment of the larynx, dorsal segment of the pharynx will make the windpipe. dorsal segment of the larynx will make the windpipe, and the ventral segment will make the windpipe, and the dorsal segment will make the food pipe here. The back side is the dorsal side, the front side is the ventral side. Okay. The initial segment of our windpipe or trachea, the initial segment of our windpipe or trachea, that is called as larynx. It is called as larynx or sound box or voice box. And after larynx, we have the windpipe or trachea, and the opening of the sound box or larynx, we have a cap which is protecting it, that is called as epiglottis, and the opening is called as glottis. The opening of sound box is called as glottis, and that is protected by epiglottis. And this epiglottis, the nature of epiglottis is that is made up of cartilage. It is made up of elastic cartilage. It is made up of elastic cartilage. Okay. Now, why this larynx is called as sound box? Again, that's also another cartilaginous structure. This sound box is made up of 9 cartilages. This sound box is made up of 9 cartilages, and it has 4 vocal cords. That's having 4 vocal cords, and out of the 4 vocal cords, by using 2, we can produce sound while we are exhaling air. So this is a very interesting fact. While we are inhaling, we cannot produce sound. Rather, while we are exhaling, we can produce sound. Right? If you try inhaling and speaking, you cannot speak. But when you are exhaling, then only with the help of your vocal cords you can produce sounds. And what I said, out of the 4 vocal cords, these only 2 vocal cords will help us to produce sound. And the remaining 2 vocal cords are called as false vocal cord. They will give support to our true or sound producing vocal cords, right? Okay. Now, if you check the trachea, that is equipped with some incomplete cartilaginous ring made up of hyaline cartilage. So this trachea, throughout the trachea, there are 16 to 20 C-shaped incomplete ring. Okay. What is the importance of the C-ring cartilage of this trachea? So just behind the trachea, just to the dorsal side of trachea, this is the food pipe or esophagus. This is the food pipe or esophagus. Now, while you are engulfing the food, the esophagus will exhibit continuous contraction and relaxation, that is called as peristaltic movement. Now, that peristaltic movement of esophagus will produce or create a force towards this trachea, and that may choke or that may block the tracheal space. And if the tracheal space is choked, you will die. So that's why, that's a precaution created by the Almighty. If you keep the complete ring, then it will be easier to choke the trachea. Instead, if you are keeping the C ring or incomplete ring, the trachea will never choke. So that is the scientific reason behind the incomplete ring structure of trachea. Right. Okay. Now, this trachea will get bifurcated. In the zone where it's getting bifurcated, that got a special name called as carina. Now, who can write down in the comment section, okay, near to which vertebral bone this trachea generally bifurcates to form 2 primary bronchi. The trachea will get bifurcated and it will form primary bronchi primary bronchi will get bifurcated, and that will form secondary bronchi. Secondary bronchi will get bifurcated, and that will form tertiary bronchi. The tertiary bronchi will get bifurcated, and that will form some narrow tubes called as bronchioles. So, the branches of tertiary bronchi is called as initial bronchioles. Initial bronchioles. Starting from the trachea up to the initial bronchioles, you will be finding these cartilaginous rings or plates. Okay, so it's near to the fifth thoracic vertebrae. Near to the fifth thoracic vertebrae, that is, the space is called as carina, where this trachea is getting bifurcated, and it will form two primary bronchi. Then the branches of primary bronchi is called as secondary bronchi. The branches of secondary bronchi is called as tertiary bronchi, and the narrowest branching that is called as bronchioles, and the initial bronchioles, and the later on the bronchioles are called as terminal bronchioles. Terminal bronchioles. Okay. Now what after terminal bronchioles? So if these are the terminal bronchioles, further that will become narrowed down and will form respiratory bronchiole, then alveolar duct, alveolar sac, and ultimately it will form alveoli, and ultimately inside the alveoli gaseous exchange will be the major site of gaseous exchange. So if this is the end part of your terminal bronchiole, what after that? After terminal bronchiole, you will be finding these are the respiratory bronchiole, after respiratory bronchioles, you will be finding alveolar ducts, After alveolar ducts, you will be finding alveolar sacs, and ultimately it will end with some tiny thin-walled structure called as alveoli. Okay. So starting from the respiratory bronchiole to alveoli, this is the zone of exchange of gases. So from respiratory bronchiole to alveoli, this is called as exchange zone or respiratory zone of respiratory system. And starting from the external nostril to terminal bronchiole, this is called as conducting zone. This is called as conducting zone. Why? What is the difference between conducting zone and exchange zone? Conducting zone is doing conduction or transportation of air from external nostril and delivering it towards the alveoli. So transportation of air, then filtration of the air out of dust, microbes, and air conditioning of the air, providing moisture, maintaining the temperature. So these are the functions of conducting zone. So there are four functions. Conducting zone is transporting the air. Conducting zone is maintaining the temperature of the air. Conducting zone is adding moisture to the air, because the air you are inhaling, that is dry in nature. Conducting zone is filtering the air from dust and microbial particles. So these four are the functions of conducting zone, and the function of exchange or respiratory zone is to perform exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. This is the real zone inside our lungs where gaseous exchange is taking place, but inside the conducting zone there will be no gaseous exchange. Okay. So that was about the anatomy of our respiratory system, right? Now if you want to check our lungs, now we'll talk about our lungs. So this is the right lung, and this is the left lung. Okay, this is the outer covering of right lung, outer covering of left lung. So lung is a very delicate structure. Each lung is having near about 150 million alveoli. Each lung is having near about 150 million alveoli. So both the lung is having near about 300 millions of tiny alveolar sacs. And as because the delicate nature of the lungs, you need to protect, you need to wrap the lungs with something like shock absorber, and that covering is called as pleura. So the outer covering of lungs, that is called as pleura, and the outer pleura is called as parietal pleura or outer pleura, that is facing your body wall, and the inner pleura, that is called as visceral pleura, that is facing your lungs, and the space between them, that is called as pleural space, and that is filled with pleural fluid, and that's acting as shock absorber while you are performing breathing movement with the help of your respiratory machines. And the respiration through our lungs, that is called as pulmonary respiration. We respire through lungs, that's why the mode is called as pulmonary respiration. Insects, they respire through trachea, that mode is called as tracheal respiration. If you check frog, if you check earthworm, they can exchange gas with the help of their skin, that is called as cutaneous respiration. Okay, fish or the aquatic arthropods or the tadpole larva, they have gills for respiration, that is called as branchial respiration. Remember, it's not bronchial, it's branchial respiration. So respiration through lungs, that is pulmonary respiration. Respiration through skin, cutaneous respiration, that is exhibited by earthworms and frogs. Respiration through gills like fishes and aquatic arthropods or tadpole larva, that is called as branchial respiration. Okay. Now let's come back to our lungs. So this is the left lung, this is the right lung. Now we all know that our apex of our heart is tilted towards the left side, and that is acquiring some space here, and that's why the left lung is sacrificing some volume of space, and that's making the left lung little bit smaller in terms of surface area. So the larger lung is right lung and the smaller lung is left lung. But one twist is there. Okay, so width wise, if you check the width, obviously width and area is higher, is larger for left lung. But if you check the length, your left lung is longer. The length is more for left lung, but the width is more for right lung, but the overall area is more inside your right lung only. Okay. Now this single lung, that is again divided, this lung is divided into lobes, right? So this lung is divided into two lobes, left lung is divided into two lobes and the right lung is divided into three lobes. And these grooves which are separating out one lobe from another, that is called as fissure. That is called as fissure. So that's why we call that right lung is trilobed in nature. Left lung is bilobed in nature. Okay. The name of the fissure also you need to know. For the left lung, the fissure is called as oblique fissure. For right lung, it has one oblique fissure and one horizontal fissure. So which fissure is common for both the lungs? Oblique fissure is common for both the lungs, and horizontal fissure, it is exclusively present into the right lung, and that's making the right lung trilobular in nature. Okay. Now from the anatomy of our respiratory system, if anybody want to ask anything, you are free to keep your comment or put your comment into the chat box. Okay. Now another biological machinery present inside our body, and that is our heart. Okay. So our heart is present in between the lungs, and that location is called as mediastinum. The location is called as mediastinum, and into the cardiac notch of our left lung, the apex of heart is embedded, and the zone between the lungs, that is called as mediastinum. And the embryonic origin of the heart is mesodermal. Again, heart is mesodermally originated organ, and the tissues, kind of tissue, will be finding into the heart, into our heart, that is epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, as well as neural tissue. Four kinds of tissue will be finding into our heart. Okay. Now this heart is covered. First we will talk about the outer covering. The outer covering of the heart, that is called as pericardium. Pericardium is the outer covering of our heart. Okay. Now, if you check the wall of your heart, that's having three distinct layers. So the outer layer of wall of our heart, that is called as epicardium. Middle layer of our heart, that is called as myocardium. Innermost layer of our heart, that is called as endocardium. Now heart is having four chambers. This is right atrium, left atrium. This is right atrium. This is right ventricle. This is left ventricle. So 4 chambers of heart, and these upper chambers or the atria, they are modified for, or they are functioning as a receiving chamber. So blood is received by atrium and blood is pumped. Blood is pumped with the help of ventricles, and left atria will be receiving oxygenated blood and the similar blood will be pumped by left ventricle. Right atrium will be receiving deoxygenated blood, the similar blood will be pumped by the right ventricle. Okay, now how these chambers are separated from each other? Okay, so if you want to separate out the right side of your heart from the left side, you need to keep a wall, and the wall is called as septum, and the wall is called as septum. Yes. Now the septum which is separating right ventricle to left ventricle, that is called intraventricular septum. The septum which is separating right atrium from left atrium, that is called as intraatrial septum. And at that junction of intraatrial septum and intraventricular septum, the fibrous part of the septum, that is called as atrioventricular septum. So septum is having 3 sections: intraventricular septum, intraatrial septum and atrioventricular septum. The septum in between the ventricles, that is muscular in nature. The septum in between the atria, there also, that is also muscular in nature. But the septum which is connecting both of these two septum, the atrial septum and the ventricular septum, they are connected by atrioventricular septum, that is fibrous in nature. Okay. Now how you will be separating out right atrium from right ventricle? For that we have valves, and that is called as tricuspid valve. The valve is having 3 cusp. The valve is having 3 cusp. So that's why the valve which is separating out right atrium to right ventricle, that is called as tricuspid valve. The valve which is separating out left atrium to left ventricle, that is called as bicuspid valve, or sometimes we call it mitral valve, and that valve is having only 2 cusp or 2 flap, that's why it's called as bicuspid valve. It looks like the mitre, cap of mitre, that's why it's called as mitral valve. Okay. Now you can check over here, this bicuspid and tricuspid valve, they are attached with the wall of ventricle. They are attached with the wall of ventricle in a very firm manner. Now, who is holding these bicuspid and tricuspid valves with the wall of ventricle? For that we have some special fibrous structures are present here, and we call them chordae tendineae. So chordae tendineae are cord-like structure. These are fibers which are holding bicuspid and tricuspid valves very tightly with the pillars present on the wall of ventricle, right? Okay. And the wall of ventricle you will be finding papillary muscles. And with papillary muscles, you will be finding some pillar-like structure called as columnae corneae. Okay. So pillar-like structure associated with the papillary muscles of ventricle, they are called as columnae corneae. And if you check the right ventricle, you will be finding 3 pillars, 3 columnae corneae. If you check the left ventricle, you will be finding 2 pillars or 2 columnae corneae, because there are 2 cusps of bicuspid valve, there are 3 cusps of tricuspid valve. Okay. Now few more valves we need to explore while you are checking inside our heart. So we are done with bicuspid and tricuspid valve. Often tricuspid and bicuspid valves are called as atrioventricular valve, as because they are separating out atrium from ventricles. Now let's check the entry point of these arteries. So this C or the J-shaped artery, that is called the aorta or the systemic artery, and this T-shaped artery, the blue T-shaped artery, that is called the pulmonary artery. The opening of pulmonary artery is at the edge of right ventricle, and the opening of this aorta is at the edge of this left ventricle. And the opening of pulmonary artery and aorta is guarded by three half moon shaped valves, and we call them as semilunar valves. Semilunar valves. So the opening of pulmonary artery and aorta is guarded by three semilunar valves. Okay, by the pressure of blood which is coming from right ventricle and left ventricle, they will forcefully open these semilunar valves which are guarding the opening of these two arteries, right? Okay. Now, apart from these arteries, we will be finding some veins as well. What are the main veins? The veins which are fetching oxygenated blood from the lungs and delivering into the left atrium, they are called as pulmonary veins. They are called as pulmonary veins. How many pulmonary veins are there? 4 pulmonary veins are there. They are bringing oxygenated blood from lungs and delivering into the left atrium. Okay. Now let's come to the right side. This large vein which is pouring deoxygenated blood into the right atrium from the upper side, that is called as superior vena cava. Superior vena cava, which is fetching deoxygenated blood from the organs present upwards to the heart. This particular vein, another prime vein of your body, which is collecting deoxygenated blood from the lower organs, and the name is inferior vena cava. So inferior vena cava and superior vena cava, often we call them as systemic veins, and they are pouring deoxygenated or carbon dioxide rich blood inside the right atrium. So that was at a brief, we have covered the basic anatomy of human heart. Okay, now up to this topic, if you have any question, any doubt if you want to ask, then you can write down your comment into the chat box. Okay, repeat explanation, no issue. So if these two are the upper chambers and these two are the lower chambers of your heart, and this is the outermost covering. The covering of your heart is called as pericardium, right? Upper two chambers are called as atria. This is right atrium and left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. The wall which is separating out the right side of your heart to the left side, that is called as septum. That is called as septum. Now the septum which is separating both the ventricles, that is called as ventricular septum. The septum which is separating both the atria, that is called as atrial septum. And another septum which is bridging the atrial and ventricular septum, that is called as atrioventricular septum. Okay. Now here valves which are separating out right atrium to right ventricle, that is called as tricuspid valve. The valve which is separating out left atrium to left ventricle, that is called as bicuspid valve. Why tricuspid and bicuspid? If you observe this, like the flap of doors, you will be finding 3 flaps are present. So that's why we call it tricuspid. For this valve, you will be finding 2 flaps or 2 cusps. That's why it's called as bicuspid valve. Now what is the function of valve here? What is the function of valve? The function of valve, act as a mechanical diaphragm, right? Diaphragm kind of structure which is the opening and closing will be regulated by some muscles, though valves are fibrous structure in nature, membranous fibrous structure in nature. They will maintain the unidirectional flow of liquid. Valves will maintain unidirectional flow of liquid. Like blood only can come from the atrium to ventricle but cannot go back. So that unidirectional flow is maintained by the closing and opening of both the valves, that is tricuspid on the right side, bicuspid on the left side. Okay, so that was the rapid explanation. And from the right ventricle, what you can observe, a T-shaped artery is originated from the right ventricle. It is called pulmonary artery. From the left ventricle, the C or the J-shaped artery is originated, that is called as aorta. Now the veins which are opening inside the left atrium, they are called as pulmonary veins. The veins which are opening into the right atrium, they are called as systemic vein. From downside the systemic vein is coming, that is called inferior vena cava. From the upside the systemic vein is coming and pouring deoxygenated blood into the right atrium, that is called as superior vena cava. Okay. Now conducting system of our heart. Conducting system, our heart keep on beating with time. In a minute at an average, the heartbeat is 70 to 75 times, right? So who is responsible for that? Let's check out. So heart is having some inbuilt modified cardiac musculature, and that is called as nodal system. Nodal system of our heart. And the prime node, the main node that is present to the upper left corner of this right atrium, right? So this is the prime node present on the upper left corner of this right atrium, and that is called as SAN. SA node, sinoatrial node. Sometimes we call it pacemaker. Why we call it as pacemaker? In a minute, it can shoot 70 to 75 depolarization. 70 to 75 times heartbeat that is actually originated into this sand, and that's why we call it as pacemaker. Okay. Another strip of nodal tissue that is present into the lower right corner of the same chamber, and that is known as AV node, atrioventricular node, present at the junction of right atrium and left ventricle. That's why it's known as atrioventricular node, and sometimes we call it as pacesetter. Pacesetter. Now why it's called as pacesetter? So gradually, while the fan shoots the potential, it gets spreaded throughout the muscles of right and left atrium, and with the help of internodal fibers, that will be the signals will be reaching into the atrioventricular node. After a sudden delay, the signals will be entering into the ventricular septum and into the ventricular wall. Okay. Now, the fibers which are originating from the atrioventricular node, they are called as AV bundle or bundle of His. Okay. Initially originated as one, while entering into the ventricular septum, they will get bifurcated into the left AV bundle and right AV bundle. The left AV bundle is stronger and thicker than the right AV bundle. Sometimes this AV bundle is also called as bundle of His. Bundle of His. Okay. Now gradually left and right AV bundle will enter into the ventricular wall, and upon reaching there, they will get branched to supply that electrochemical signal to each cardiac musculature. The branches are called as Purkinje fiber. These branches are called as Purkinje fiber. Okay. Now this network system present inside throughout the muscles of our heart, that is called as nodal system, and they are nothing but these nodal fibers. They are modified cardiac muscles. And as because they can produce their own signal or own beat, the property is called as myogenic nature, myogenicity. So our heart is myogenic in nature, and heart can beat by its own, so it's called as autorhythmic. Okay, so there is the autorhythmicity of our heart due to the presence of special cardiac musculature, right? And starting from sand, the rhythm will be generated into the sand or into the pacemaker. Through internodal fiber, the rhythm will be sent to atrioventricular node. From atrioventricular node, that will be segregated into the AV bundle or bundle of His. The bundle of His will get bifurcated into left bundle of His and right bundle of His, and gradually they will form some branches, and the branches will be called as Purkinje fiber. Okay, and this is how the signal which is generated here will be spread throughout the cardiac muscle, and it will help the heart to beat, and it will perform the continuous rhythmic contraction and relaxation, which we call systole and diastole. When our heart is contracting, that is called systole. When our heart is dilating, relaxing, that is called as diastole. Okay. So this sequential or repetitive contraction or relaxation of the chambers of our heart, that is called as cardiac cycle, and while they are contracting, that is called systole, while heart is relaxing, that is called diastole. Now what is the meaning of systole? What is the meaning of diastole? Systole means heart is squeezing, the muscles are contracting, that means it's pumping the blood outside. So systole is responsible for pumping the blood, and for diastole, heart is making space to receive the blood. So diastole means when it's welcoming blood inside the chambers, and this gradual repetitive systole and diastole will make cardiac cycle. Yes.